Have you ever wondered what the Bible truly says about Iran and Israel? These two nations, often in the news for their complex political and religious tensions, have much deeper roots in the scriptures than many realize. Iran, known in ancient times as Persia, and Israel, the land of God's chosen people, have a history that stretches back thousands of years. But what is the real difference between them according to the Bible? And how do their biblical roles influence our understanding of the present and future? In the scriptures, Iran and Israel stand as two symbols, each representing a distinct aspect of God's divine plan. For Israel, it's a covenant of blessing and promise. For Persia, it's a role as an instrument of God's will, one that serves as both adversary and ally in the unfolding of prophecy. But these ancient roles are not just relics of the past. They have direct implications for the world we live in today. Join me as we dive into the fascinating biblical history of these two nations, exploring their origins, their destinies, and the prophecies that surround them. Let's uncover the real difference between Iran and Israel, as revealed in the sacred pages of the King James Bible. The story of Israel begins with a man named Abraham, whom God calls out from the land of Ur to establish a great nation. In Genesis 17:1-8, God makes a covenant with Abraham, promising that his descendants would become a mighty nation, a people set apart to serve him. "I will make thee a father of many nations," God declares, laying the foundation for the nation of Israel, which will be chosen to be a light to the world. The promise is not just for Abraham's immediate descendants, but also for all who share in his faith. Abraham's son Isaac and Isaac's son Jacob continue this divine lineage. Jacob, whose name is later changed to Israel, has 12 sons, whose descendants become the 12 tribes of Israel. This marks the official birth of the nation, and from Israel's lineage comes the promise that God's presence will dwell among them. However, Israel's journey to becoming a nation is not without hardship. The Israelites are eventually enslaved in Egypt, but God does not forget his covenant. In Exodus 19:5-6, God speaks to Moses, saying, "Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people, for all the earth is mine." This marks Israel's official calling to be God's chosen people, a nation set apart to show the world the power and holiness of the one true God. After their miraculous deliverance from Egypt, God leads the Israelites to Mount Sinai, where they receive the 10 commandments and laws that will guide their nation. The journey from slavery to the Promised Land is symbolic of the spiritual journey of Israel. It is a story of redemption, faith, and God's faithfulness to his promises. The significance of Israel's founding is amplified during the reign of King David, a man after God's own heart. As recorded in 2 Samuel 5:6-10, David establishes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, solidifying the city's importance not only for the nation, but also as the place where God's presence would reside. "The Lord has established me king over Israel," David proclaims, and with this declaration, Israel's identity as a kingdom is solidified. Israel's relationship with God is continuously affirmed throughout the scriptures. The prophets, such as Isaiah and Jeremiah, reaffirm the covenant and call Israel to repentance when they stray from God's ways. Through times of triumph and tragedy, Israel remains God's chosen people, a people he will never abandon. Despite their failures, the relationship between Israel and Persia is not just one of cooperation, but also of conflict. Though Persia was used by God to release the Israelites from Babylonian captivity and help them return to Jerusalem, the tension between these two nations was palpable throughout biblical history. This conflict is seen both in the political sphere and through prophetic visions, highlighting the struggles that Israel would face under Persian rule. One of the most significant events during the Persian era for the Jewish people is found in the book of Esther. The Persian Empire under King Xerxes Ahasuerus is portrayed as both a source of protection and oppression. In Esther 3:6-9, Haman, the king's prime minister, seeks to annihilate the Jewish people, issuing a decree to have them destroyed throughout the empire. The Jews' fate seems sealed, as Haman's hatred for them is motivated by personal animosity toward Mordecai, a Jewish leader who refused to bow to him. Haman's plot is not just a political conflict, but a spiritual one, targeting the very people through whom God's promises would be fulfilled. In Esther 4:12-16, we see Queen Esther's pivotal decision to confront the king on behalf of her people, risking her life to do so. Her courage leads to the reversal of the decree, and in Esther 9:20-22, We read about the celebration of Purim, where the Jews are delivered from the threat of annihilation. This story underscores how, even under Persian rule, God's hand was at work protecting his people, even in the face of an adversary who sought their destruction. However, the conflict between Israel and Persia isn't just limited to personal vendettas within the royal court. The larger geopolitical context also plays a role in the tension between these two nations. In the book of Daniel, the Persian Empire is directly involved in the rise and fall of other empires, including Greece. Daniel's visions in Daniel 8:5-7 show a struggle between the Persian Empire and Greece, symbolized by a ram and a goat respectively. While this vision primarily focuses on the larger conflict between the Persian and Greek empires, it also reveals the broader context of struggles that Israel would endure as various empires sought dominance over the region. In Daniel 10:13, the angel tells Daniel that the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood him for 21 days. This statement suggests that the Persian Empire's influence, both politically and spiritually, was significant in the context of the Jewish people's struggles. Despite God's protection, Israel continued to face adversity under Persian rule, and the ongoing struggle for independence and sovereignty was a theme throughout their history. While Persia played a pivotal role in restoring Israel, this restoration did not erase the challenges Israel faced. The Israelites had to navigate their place within the vast Persian Empire, balancing the mandates of their conquerors with their devotion to the one true God. This tension between obedience to foreign powers and faithfulness to God would become a recurring theme for the Jewish people, not only during Persian rule but throughout their history. When it comes to the end times, Israel and Persia, modern-day Iran, are two nations that hold significant prophetic weight in the Bible. These prophecies not only reflect the past struggles and relationships between these two ancient empires, but also point to their roles in the final events of human history. The Bible speaks of a great showdown in the last days, where nations will align against Israel, and Persia plays a prominent role in the unfolding of these events. One of the most famous prophecies concerning Persia in the end times comes from Ezekiel 38. In Ezekiel 38:1-7, we read of the prophecy of Gog and Magog, a coalition of nations that will come against Israel in the final battle. In verse 5, Persia is specifically mentioned as one of the nations that will align with Gog in this coalition. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet. The inclusion of Persia in this prophecy is striking, especially given its historical relationship with Israel. In the end times, Persia will stand against Israel, fulfilling the role of an adversary in God's divine plan. However, this prophecy is not just about conflict. Ezekiel 38:17-23 reveals that despite the odds, God will intervene and protect Israel from this powerful alliance. Thus saith the Lord God, Art thou he of whom I have spoken in old time by my servants the prophets of Israel, which prophesied in those days many years that I would bring thee against them? God declares that he will defeat the invaders, making his power and sovereignty known to the entire world. The battle will not be one of human strength, but of divine intervention, as God delivers Israel from its enemies and vindicates his holy name. In addition to this battle, the role of Persia in the last days is also reflected in other parts of the Bible. The book of Daniel offers a vision of a future conflict between kingdoms, with Persia playing a role in the ongoing struggle for supremacy. In Daniel 11:2-4, the angel reveals that after the fall of Persia, Greece would rise to power, leading to the eventual appearance of the Antichrist. This passage highlights how the geopolitical changes in the ancient world foreshadow the tumultuous times that will come in the end days, where Israel will once again be caught in the middle of global conflicts. While the Bible does not provide a detailed map of every specific conflict in the end times, it is clear that Iran, as the modern-day successor to Persia, will be one of the key players in the last days. This role as an adversary of Israel is consistent with other end-times prophecies found throughout the scriptures. For instance, in Revelation 16:12-16, there is mention of the kings of the East gathering for battle, and many interpret this to include Iran as a significant part of the coalition. This aligns with the biblical picture of a global confrontation in which Israel's enemies will come together, and Persia will once again play a central role in the drama of the final days. Despite the seemingly dire circumstances, the Bible offers hope. The ultimate message is clear. God will defend his people, Israel. While Persia and other nations may rise against Israel, God's promise of protection and victory will stand. As Israel faces its greatest trials in the last days, it is not Israel's strength that will save them, but the mighty hand of God, who has promised to preserve his people through every trial and tribulation. When examining the biblical identities of Israel and Persia, modern-day Iran, it becomes clear that these two nations occupy distinctly different roles in God's divine plan. Israel, as God's chosen people, is the recipient of divine promises, blessings, and covenants. Persia, on the other hand, is often portrayed as an instrument of God's will, sometimes as a tool of judgment, other times as a force used to fulfill God's greater purpose for his people. These differences highlight the contrasting destinies of the two nations as seen in the Bible. Israel's identity is rooted in a covenant with God, beginning with Abraham. In Genesis 17:1-8, God promises Abraham that his descendants will become a great nation, and this promise is reaffirmed throughout Scripture. The Israelites are not chosen because of their own merit, but because of God's grace and purpose, as the Lord tells Israel in Deuteronomy 7:6, "For thou art an holy people unto the Lord, thy God. The Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth." Israel's role is to be a witness to God's glory and to share his commandments with the world. In contrast, Persia's role in the Bible is more complex. While Persia is not a chosen nation like Israel, God uses it to fulfill his plan. In Isaiah 45:1, God declares, "Thus saith the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, to subdue nations before him." Cyrus, the Persian king, is referred to as God's anointed, a title usually reserved for Israel's kings. This indicates that Persia, though not the recipient of the covenant, has been chosen by God to play a pivotal role in the restoration of Israel and the fulfillment of his promises. Persia's influence is also seen in the liberation of the Israelites from Babylonian exile, which demonstrates how God works through even foreign nations to bring about his will. Yet while Persia is an instrument of God's plan, it is not exempt from judgment. In the prophetic visions of Daniel, we see Persia portrayed as a powerful empire, but one that will eventually give way to another, the Greek Empire, which will rise to prominence in Daniel 8:20-22. This succession of empires shows that while Persia is used by God for a season, it too will face consequences for its actions. This theme of divine judgment against nations that rise against God's people is evident in many prophecies, including the prophecy of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38:1-7, where Persia, as part of a coalition of nations, is set to oppose Israel in the last days. Israel's destiny, however, is firmly anchored in God's eternal promises. While the nation would face hardships, exile, and suffering throughout its history, God's covenant with Israel is unbreakable. In Jeremiah 31:35-37, God declares that Israel's relationship with him is permanent. "Thus saith the Lord, which giveth the sun for a light by day. If those ordinances depart from before me, saith the Lord, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me forever." Despite all the nations of the earth, Israel remains God's chosen people, and its ultimate redemption is assured. In contrast to Israel's eternal covenant, Persia's future in the Bible is less certain. While Persia plays a significant role in the story of Israel's return to their land and the rebuilding of Jerusalem, it is not promised the same enduring relationship with God. Instead, Persia is depicted as part of the broader narrative of nations rising and falling according to God's will. While it serves as a tool in God's hands, its future is intertwined with judgment, particularly as it aligns against Israel in the end times. The differences in their roles also highlight a theological distinction. Israel's identity is rooted in a unique relationship with God, while Persia's identity is shaped by its function within God's greater plan. Israel is called to be a light to the nations, Isaiah 42:6, to demonstrate the power of God's holiness and to fulfill his promises to Abraham. Persia, by contrast, is used to execute God's will, whether that means freeing Israel from exile or standing as an opponent in the final battle. While the Bible highlights these roles, Israel as God's chosen and Persia as an instrument, both nations are part of the larger narrative of redemption. Israel's trials, struggles, and ultimate triumph are central to God's story, while Persia's role, though lesser in terms of the covenant, is integral to the unfolding of prophecy and God's sovereignty over all nations. As we've explored the biblical relationship between Israel and Persia, modern-day Iran, it's clear that these two nations are not simply historical entities but pivotal players in God's divine plan. Israel, chosen by God to be his special people, is central to the story of redemption. Throughout the Bible, God promises to protect, restore, and ultimately redeem Israel, no matter how many adversaries rise against them. Their destiny is marked by God's unbreakable covenant, one that endures throughout the ages, regardless of Israel's disobedience or suffering. On the other hand, Persia's role in the Bible is one of both judgment and deliverance. While Persia is not chosen as Israel is, God uses it as an instrument to fulfill his will, whether it's liberating Israel from exile or standing as an adversary in the end times. Persia's story, especially in the rise of King Cyrus and the eventual coalition in Ezekiel 38, reveals the complex nature of God's sovereignty over all nations. Persia serves as a reminder that God can use any nation, whether for blessing or judgment, to fulfill his ultimate purpose. As we look to the future, the roles of these two nations in biblical prophecy are not yet fully realized. Israel, though restored to its land, faces ongoing challenges, and the prophecies surrounding the end times suggest that its greatest trials are yet to come. Iran, or Persia, as prophesied in Ezekiel and Daniel, will play a significant role in the final events of human history, aligning against Israel but ultimately being defeated by God's mighty hand. In all of this, the Bible offers a clear message. Despite the trials, the struggles, and the conflicts, God's promises remain true. Israel will stand as a testament to God's faithfulness, and even the nations that rise against it will ultimately answer to God. His plan will come to fruition, and his will be done. In conclusion, the real difference between Israel and Persia is not just a matter of history, geography, or politics. It's about divine purpose. Israel is God's chosen people, marked by his covenant and destined for ultimate redemption. Persia, while used by God in significant ways, does not share this same eternal promise. And yet, both nations are essential in the fulfillment of God's grand design, a design that assures us that no matter what nations rise and fall, God remains in control and his plan will not fail. As we reflect on the biblical roles of these two nations, we are reminded of the enduring power of God's sovereignty and his faithfulness to his people. The story of Israel and Persia is not just one of conflict, but one of divine intervention, protection, and the ultimate triumph of God's will over all the nations of the earth.